Thanks for taking the time this morning. I've got the privilege, the treat, and these are two um, good old friends. Well, not in age, right? But tenured friends of ours. Nadine and I have been together for how many years now?
Oh my God, seven, eight?
7, 8 years. We met on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And Elliot and I have been about 5 now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And I may tell them how we met because it's a relatively funny story. So yeah,
And so there are two successful organizations that have come to the U.S., fought the battles, made the mistakes, continue to fight the battles, continue to win, continue to make mistakes, which is what I love about this panel this morning. It's like an M&M a surgeon will look at, right? Is here's the lessons that we've learned. We're hoping you can take some notes on it and certainly maybe expedite and save yourselves some money and or time. So we'll go there. But first, for those who maybe might be under a rock, don't understand Proximie and the sort of paths forward, but it started in 2016.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's lovely to be here. And again, great to be amongst two really good friends of mine. So delighted to be able to hopefully share some of our learnings and accelerate some of your paths to crossing over the Atlantic. But my name is Nadine. I'm a reconstructive plastic surgeon. You can tell from my accent I didn't grow up here. I grew up in the States, but I've been here for about 24 years and set up my company here. And Proximie is really my solution, having lived and spent, decades in operating rooms, to think about how do we transform the operating room? How do we think about the operating room as a construct that is often an important part of hospitals, right? It's a big asset for hospitals. It's where we deliver really quality care to our patients, but it's quite an analog environment for hospitals as well. It's a big cost center, it's a big revenue driver, but the way we manage it and run it is very siloed, it's very disconnected. And so you end up with a lot of variability in care, variability in productivity and utilization, and variability in sort of the workforce and outcomes around that as well. And so my feeling was if we could bring in an operating system, a software that sits between the EHR and the cloud and becomes that nexus that enables us to connect to experts around various operating rooms, to collect all that multimodal data in the room. Think about all the data. You've got your medical imaging systems, your medical record systems, your staff, whatever device you're using, whether it's a robot, a video stack, you name it. And it's all sort of disconnected. If we can pull all of that data together, how do we really unlock insights that help us drive to those performance metrics that we care about, which are, of course, around quality and safety, but also as a health system leaders, it's around productivity and utilization. So we are kind of that intelligence layer sitting in the operating room, and we work largely with hospitals and medical device companies. And with hospitals, we are turning their ORs into smart connected ORs, and we can drive a very clear ROI for them around utilization and quality metrics. And then for big strategics, we help them accelerate their route to market and understanding of their devices in the market as well. So we've been able to show device partners that they can train twice as many doctors and nurses in half the time, that they're able to reduce their OpEx by deploying fewer staff to support more healthcare workers using their systems and devices, but also that they can accelerate their R&D pathway because they can actually understand and see how the devices are being used in the room. And to finally say, how we deploy it is it's simply we deploy camera sensors in the OR and a sort of a box, sort of a stack. And through that, we're able to sort of connect and observe and bring all of that information together. And we've been around for many years now, I think 8 to 10 years. We are in over 50 countries. We're deployed in, hundreds and hundreds of operating rooms around the world. And we work with close to 40 medical device companies and hundreds of hospitals as well. So it's been an interesting journey so far, and excited to share more.
Oh, yeah. Excellent.
yeah. Well, thanks, Joe, for the invite and the LSI team. So I'm Elliot Street. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Inovus Medical. Like Nadine, I'm a physician by training, trained in Manchester and Oxford, and founded Inovus Medical in my bedroom whilst at medical school, looking at the problem of my own training pathway in surgery. That was 2012, so it was quite some time ago now. And ultimately, fast forward to today, what's the problem that Inovus as a business is solving? That problem is that we simply don't have enough fully trained surgeons on the planet to keep up with demand. It's causing 1.5 million preventable deaths per year. And our solution to that is to shift the paradigm of the way we train surgeons away from the patient bedside, which is unscalable and simply not working, into the simulated environment. And so we do that with a suite of integrated surgical training technologies. These are hybrid bits of hardware with a digital surgery platform sitting on top of them. And I think we'll share a few unique insights today in terms of scaling into the US, based on the fact that we're a business that manufactures hardware here in the United Kingdom. So I think there's some stuff to share on that. And the fact that we have a product that has a double-edged sword. So one positive is it's unregulated. So that's going to be an interesting arc for us to discuss. The flip side to that is it doesn't really have any clear purchasing pathway. So we're having to sort of make that one up, and we'll share a few stories of some inventive execution to drive adoption specifically in the US, which we've then used elsewhere globally. So looking forward to the discussion. And again, thanks for having us.
Fabulous. So as you can see, both are generating revenue. I still refer to them emerging tech companies. So I usually break down startup companies and emerging tech companies. Startup companies generally are very early stage, A, B round usually, and still on a pathway to, clearance through the FDA or approval through the FDA. But eventually, once you start to slide through on an execution and sales distribution, that's an emerging tech still. You might be looking for a liquidity event. You might not be. That could be a roll-up. That could be an acquisition, could be an IPO. And I also deliberately selected, beside being two fabulous friends, it wasn't a device per se, because I think there's a lot to be learned about the adjacent technologies and adjacent solutions to the medtech industry. And our firm, the Mullings Group, works worldwide, and we're starting to see more and more health tech, medtech come into the U.S. market that might not be making a device per se. So there's some interesting dynamics to learn from there. So let's start at the primary pain points of Elliot. I'll start with you. Going commercial in a country that you're not familiar with, working with a healthcare sort of economy in the UK or EU that's totally different in the US, and what are the preconceived notions you had, and what did you meet upon first entry?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I will answer that question, but I'll start with a little arc, and the arc is how you and I met. So I mentioned at the start that we founded Inovus in 2012. From 2012 through to effectively 2021, our entire focus was our home market. So we built our business on a robust home market in the NHS, and we didn't look to expand internationally until we had a really, really solid base here. 2021, and prior to that, we actually started just before COVID had to pause. 2021, we were like, okay, how are we going to break into the US market? Who do we know? Through a longer story, which we won't share here, we knew Joe, and I emailed Joe and said, Joe, I'm going to land in Florida. I'm coming to your office. I'd like to work there for a week. You don't know me. And by the way, would you like to interview me in one of your nice videos that you do? And he very, very kindly obliged. The reason I'm telling that story is the early approach to the US market for us was get on the ground and just start asking loads and loads and loads of questions, challenge our own assumptions, share our almost 10 years of experience in the NHS, and then ask, is this equivalent in the US? Because you can go in with those assumptions that there will be equivalency, and very quickly you realize there isn't. The other thing we did, of course, is we were very targeted when we came to the US. So we started in Florida and said, we're not going to leave the state until we start selling product in this state. Why Florida? I like the weather, but it's densely populated with some good organizations who are pretty forward thinking around their procurement strategies. And when you get there, and I'm going to get a show of hands in a second, you get to the US, if you haven't been there from a business perspective, it is massive. Florida is basically the UK, and so you have to try and break this problem down. Just before I do hand over, a show of hands in the room who's a med tech looking to scale their business or growing their business, and keep your hand up if you're UK or European domiciled. Yeah, okay. So it is a totally different kettle of fish. And we're going to talk about some of that with regards to the capital required and the other approaches. But that was generally our approach. Go and find some friendlies, go and ask lots of stupid questions and focus in one specific area and make sure that you can get some initial either product market fit or some traction commercially or at least some sense of commercial traction early.
And Nadine, Elliot reminded me that you and I met. You reached out on LinkedIn.
I did. I messaged you. I remember it was a weekend. You responded, and I was having lunch with my kids. I was like, "This is a really important call. I have to go." I thought it'd be like 50 minutes. I think we were on the call for about an hour and a half. I think I missed the whole lunch, but it was a really good call. And you really could understand that not only we don't build hardware. We are a software company, that we were building quite a disruptive category. It wasn't just the product that we were building, but it was actually the category we were disrupting, because we were coming in and telling health systems and partners, the operating room landscape was going to completely change. It was going to be digital. It was going to be data enabled, more objective, more transparent. And so there was a lot around thinking around the culture and how do you bring that technology. And so for us, and there'll be a lot of learnings around capital and deployment, but it was also about focus. We were very fortunate in the early days. Again, we started here. And I think there's some benefit to starting use. It's a great sandbox to test a lot of what you're doing at a much lower cost base. And really, and there's a proximity to customers, which is different than America, which is so much bigger. But what was interesting is we almost got pulled to the US almost sooner than we were even ready. COVID had hit. A lot of the big strategics needed our technology like yesterday. I think we were a team of 10 or 15 at the time, one of my colleagues in the audience today. And one of the biggest strategics, one of the top 5, basically reached out and said, "Can you service us in the US like from next week? And we have these 15 sites." And, we're like, "Yeah, of course we can," and it was COVID and, we were going to make it work, but it was that pull. And so what we decided to do is, rather than go straight to the direct customer base, which is the hospitals and health systems, we were going to leverage the access through the strategics, through the indirect market, to understand and learn more about the U.S. health system market. Because whilst I grew up there, I didn't really work in the U.S. health system. So I wasn't as familiar with how hospitals run, how procurement processes run, how do you build the business case, the ROI for them, because you've got to show that within a hospital. And so we were very fortunate to go through the strategics first. And that did a couple of things for us. One, we got to really get access to the U.S. market quickly. 2, it forced us to really think about how you scale as an organization, like how do you operationalize global scale? And that comes from, implementation, customer support, 24/7, services. We didn't have to just work within UK hours now. We had to be available for all hours. And then really think about what are those entry points or those wedges in the market. And finally, selfishly, what they did is they also put us in front of some really big KOLs, some really big surgeons in the US market who became our biggest advocates. I still remember till this day, I think it was our maybe third or fourth month in working with the strategic, supporting them. I get a call from UCSD, from one of their team members there, one of our customer success managers that we'd hired. And he said, "The chief of surgery wants to speak to you." I'm like, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we've totally messed it up. What's happened?
Santi?
Yeah, Santi. Mm-hmm. Santiago Horgan says, "Hello, you don't know me. I'm Dr. Santiago Horgan. How did you come up with this?" And, I talked him through the story and he said, "I absolutely love it. I'm going to be your biggest champion." And it was those early surgeons that really helped us then figure out how we sort of jump into the US health system. The other bit I couldn't echo enough is just focusing on a few cities. We were getting demand up and down the country, but the US is huge. And if you need to deploy customer success or support on the ground, you really need to be targeted. And so like you, we focused on Florida, Southern California, Colorado. I think those were the 3 areas we started. And then we added Chicago and Houston. And even till this day, we're really just focused on those key areas and sort of expanding from there. So I think as you think about the US, you have to really think about when is the right time. Have you got enough of a pull or a specific focus to go to one area that you think you can sort of build a market there? Have you got the right capital? We'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But just being ultra focused and trying to build those early proof points is critical.
Here's the mistake I'll share with you. I've probably brought more than 40 companies into the U.S. from OUS, early stage. Usually the first hire is what we get pulled in by the VCs or the CEO. And invariably, it's either from the Middle East, Israel, especially the UK, Germany, Italy, Australia. Those seem to be the most prolific. Here's what happens nearly every time, and then I want each of you to chime in on this, is the company tries to get somebody in the U.S., and they know somebody who knows somebody. And then they hire that person. And usually it's a board member who knows somebody there. And they hire that person on the ground because it's a familiar and it was referred by a board member. So that's number one. Number two is you don't match the cultures. You don't understand the culture there. And if you're going to put somebody over there, that person has to understand your culture as well as you understanding theirs. And I work with a lot of Israeli companies, a very unique culture in medtech. I've been doing it for 3 decades. And it's more important that you get the hire who understands the culture on the source company side. And then finally, when you bring your product to the US, it's going to be wrong. Your baby's going to be ugly as shit. And you've got to take the understanding that your baby's ugly, but together you're going to make it pretty for the U.S. market. And then finally, U.S. market wages are insanely high relative to the rest of the world, maybe Switzerland. So you have to be prepared to be well beyond your comfort zone. And oftentimes your lead commercial person will definitely be making more than your CEO in your home country. Those are all givens. And you've got to be prepared for that. And if you shop for price in the U.S., you're going to fill that position 3 times within the first 2 years. Mm-hmm. So with those ground rules, Nadine, will you just fill in the blanks for me?
There's a lot to fill in. I was thinking I should have brought a paper and pen to write down some notes. Many things. I mean, first of all, what's been really helpful for us, and I'm not just saying this because Joe's on stage, is when you're really thinking about setting up your business in another area, and when we thought about the U.S. is, the number of discussions we had with Joe, it wasn't just about, I need to hire a commercial lead. Can you help me hire that? We really went into in depth. I mean, we went in person and spent time with them, is really thinking about the culture, the cost base, like what is our budget? Can we actually set up in the U.S.? I mean, one thing I didn't mention that I do is I'm also the kind of co-founder of the NHS Venture Fund, Radiant Health Ventures. And so I advise a lot of our companies, when is the right time to go to the U.S.? And, everyone thinks, just go to the U.S. and I'll hire one person and that's it. No, there's a huge cost modeling that has to happen around actually going and executing in the U.S. It's not just about hiring ahead. There's a lot more around it. And so thinking through the market access, what's the right sort of level, again, we see a lot of companies say, I just need to go hire a CCO or a president or a GM for America. You probably just need a director who's going to run around and roll up their sleeves at the early stages as you're trying to figure out the market. You probably don't need to go up that senior. And so those are the kinds of discussions, like what level do we need to bring someone in at? What is the actual scope? What do we actually want them to do? Is it really going out and scouting? Because as a CEO of an early stage startup, you're probably doing most of the selling. So you just need someone to pick up the pieces and help follow through and close the deals. It's understanding what markets within the U.S. you're going to be working in. Is it ASCs? Is it hospitals? Is it strategics? The culture piece is critical. I mean, it's funny. I used to say I'm the sort of translator in my company between English and English, but we had, the Brits and the Americans, and they don't always speak the same language. And so I spend a lot of my time telling my American colleagues, look, they're just a bit more subtle. You just have to, and then I'm having to tell my British colleagues, the Americans are very direct. Like, you're just don't take it personally. It's not emotional. And so you're having to sort of navigate that. And that's just between England and Britain. I can't imagine what it was like for Israel and America and all these other countries. So that culture piece is key. And also making sure that how much runway you have to actually invest. Because a lot of times what you end up doing is you'll hire someone, you run out of money in 6 months, they leave, and you've sort of flopped your US launch from day one. So those are just some of the things to think about. And so as we thought about America, we thought, okay, what we really needed early on wasn't necessarily salespeople. It was actually customer success. I could go sell it. I'm sure you were doing the selling early on. But it was more, if we do get a customer, how do we make sure they love what we're doing and want to work with us? The only other thing I'll say, which is really on the product and the ugly baby, which I sort of agree with as well, is there's different tolerances. I can say, and again, I can't speak for every product and every company, but in my experience and my humble experience with the few companies I've worked with and my own company is there's more tolerance here in the UK for an imperfect product. It can be a bit clunky. They'll work with you. They're a bit more patient. You can kind of work through it. In the US, that tolerance is not as high. If you go in and it doesn't work first, second, or third time, you're done. Like you're not going to come back to that customer again. And so we learned that in a way, the hard way. But luckily we had those KOLs like Santi that were really so excited about the product that they pushed us really hard and said, this has to be more seamless. This has to be less clicks. This has to work better. And so we dedicated then a lot of engineering time to that. And so you have to know that going in with your product, it's not going to be a slam dunk just because it worked in the UK or in Europe or wherever else you had customers that tolerated it.
Elliot?
Yeah, I want to pick up on 2 points, actually 3, just to follow through. This is really helpful when you've got 2 powerhouses on the stage. I don't have to do any of my own active thinking. So the first thing that Joe mentioned there was around that the wages are way higher. Again, there's more people that filtered in. Put your hands up if you're a UK, European domiciled medtech company or business. Great. So you've got the power of geographical arbitrage on your side if you're the leader of that company. I think both of us did this, didn't we? Which was basically, my story was from 2021 until April of this year, I commuted to the US and spent at least 50% of my time in the US as our sales leader. And we hired those sort of mid to lower level sales managers and didn't hand over the reins of the most important market on the planet to a president or a sales leader. We took responsibility for that. And the arc of that was, first of all, we went in, founder-led sales, so people will buy this. Now we're going to put someone on the ground to either work behind the founder with the larger opportunities or go and build those opportunities themselves, but still managed by the founder. And I will probably come back to the arc of our story in terms of partnership in a moment. So first point to really hammer home is you may look at the US and go, this is daunting. I don't have the resources that US companies do. I can't raise the capital, which I'm going to come on to next, to go and compete. But you've just got to think laterally about the unfair advantages you do have. Geographical arbitrage being one, you being a lower cost burden to the business and reducing your burn rate, and often being the best salesperson in the business. You just have to get used to living on a plane and managing how much time you can spend in the US. That's the first piece. The second piece, I don't know if we're going to come on to this in terms of raising capital. I mean, the founder set to my right is incredibly good at raising capital. The problem we have, how many VCs are in the room before I, brilliant, thank you. And put your hand up if you're a European and UK domicile VC or US domicile. Yeah, okay. So I'll speak from personal experience in the UK venture capital markets. Our understanding of the amount of capital that's required to go and break the US is wildly different to what you actually require. And it's wildly different to those people who actually live in the US and have built lots of medtech businesses in the US. So I think that an intellectually honest conversation, if you're raising capital and your primary focus and the primary discussion with your VCs that you bring onto the cap table is, we're raising capital to go and build and expand in the US, you're not asking for enough money. I don't care how much you're asking for. You're definitely not asking for enough money. You need a huge quantum of capital to go and do this. And the reason being, Nadine touched on it, you have to have the breathing space to get stuff wrong, because to Nadine's point and to the point of our business, we were a 10-year-old business that was in 80% of NHS trusts by the time we went to the US, and our baby was still ugly and it still didn't work. And Nadine's point, we have 2 main customer segments, hospital systems and the strategics. The strategics are completely intolerant of anything that's not working perfectly, as they should be, because they have no room for mistakes. And so you go to the US with something that works in the NHS, it may not work for those strategics. So to bring this around full circle, and maybe we'll get a chance to touch on our approach then to actually how we've grown commercially in the US and the size of our footprint. Number one, power of geographical arbitrage. It's really important. you're just going to have to really hustle. And then number two is you're going to need more capital than you think you are, and you're going to make more mistakes. And you have to be honest with that upfront to the VCs and say, here's our plan. We know it's going to go wrong, and therefore we're going to need X amount of capital to give us the breathing space to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that Elliot mentioned that's really important to understand is when the CEO is on the ground here, or somebody within highly connected within the startup is on the ground here, you're getting an unbiased view from the distant sort of outpost. I will tell you, after placing 9,000 people over 35 years with more than 900 startups, people tend to be really good human beings. And people also tend to be incredibly biased for self-preservation, especially salespeople. And so when you're getting feedback from the marketplace, from an outpost in the US, and you have a time difference, a culture difference, a communication difference, and a survival or recency bias from your commercial person that is US-based, you're going to have a delay in real fidelity, high fidelity data. And so you're going to be making decisions on that data when it's probably not as accurate as you want it to be. And you'll be pouring time and money into that. So when you have the principal come over, and I've had good clients of mine from Israel move over there and are doing yeoman's work and hiring a US-based connected person, one in particular structural heart play, but he moved his entire family over there to make sure that he got the data set that he needed in the US for that time period. So please keep that in mind, is if you're bringing your company over there, if it's not you as the CEO sitting in here, it needs to be somebody else who's equity invested in the organization from the home country. So anything else on that? Because I do want to start talking about partnerships. Those are important too in the States. Elliot, do you want to open up with that?
Yeah, let's talk about partnerships. So let's give you a little flavor for that arc of 2021 to where we are now. So 21, Elliot turns up with his backpack at Joe's office, asks all these questions, says, we're in 80% of the NHS, we've got a great product. We've actually made a few sales remotely during COVID, and now I'm going on my travels around Florida. Founder sales followed. Team on the ground followed. We're in a very niche, very scalable part of the medical technology sector, being simulation. So we don't need 200 people on the ground in terms of sales managers. We put a team into the US, and that team's focus was on what we call middle out adoption, so selling into the healthcare systems. And even with a lean team, well run with lots of focus, we realized that actually we were going to need to leverage our customer segments and cross-pollinate them to make sure that the US was a success, because even with a product that was selling, we weren't scaling quick enough with the amount of capital that we'd raised. And we were going to start getting ourselves into a bit of no man's land where you had a team that were expensive being managed okay. Then you're in a difficult position of managed okay, but you probably need someone managing them full time to get the most out of them. And then the cost base with that means that you run out of cash. So we were watching this unfold in front of us going, okay, this could turn into a disaster, because we like to think we've done a really good job of this commercial entry. In comes our approach to partnerships. We were very lucky to partner with the AAGL, leading gynecological society in the US, and a large strategic medtech, one of the leaders in women's health. And the way that partnership worked is we figured out that there was a huge amount of value for that strategic to invest in our technology and effectively deploy it into all 300 residency programs across America for OBGYN. In 2023, we secured that contract, and what that meant was we suddenly were drinking from the fire hose of a strategic who had made a very visible, very large investment in this technology. We had to spin up a bricks and mortar base in the US. We had to pull in a full customer success and implementation team. And here's a lesson that we learned. We were too slow to challenge ourselves intellectually to say, do we really need this sales team in the way we built it now that we've effectively completed US gynecology? And should we actually rebase the business quickly and focus that business entirely on that for the next few years? So my point, it's a painful point, because when you're a confident CEO, and you have to be, and you actually got some data points to say this is working, it's really hard to challenge yourself intellectually and say, it's working okay, but is it working to a scale that's going to really make an impact? And so if I could say anything, one more show of hands, and this is starting to get monotonous, but for the medtechs in the room, put your hand up if your customer segments are both strategics and hospital systems, or if you're just selling into hospital systems. So hands up if you've got both as your customer segments. Okay, and Nadine will talk about this. So just one, Moses in the corner there. If you have got more than one customer segment, I implore you, think about how you can cross-pollinate them and gain leverage, because that's been huge for us. And the hard lesson learned was, once you have an inflection point like that, challenge yourself with some difficult decisions and act quickly.
Nadine?
I mean, some really great points. And I love how Elliot's really kind of digging in deep and showing those pain points. I mean, for us, it was interesting. A couple of things. One is, I think you're right. The strategics, they're a tough customer, as they should be, and they will not tolerate, anything less than excellence. And my colleague in the audience is laughing because he had to face the brunt of a lot of that as well. But, there was a bit of catch up. You signed the deal, like, oh shit, like, can we actually deliver this? So then you're sort of trying to hire the team to deliver, and it's sort of mass hire to get there. But I think for us, a few of the mistakes. One is we thought we needed to go in sales heavy first, and then CSM, customer success, and then quickly then realized it really had to just be about customer success, because we were really doing the selling of the product was going to sell itself. The second is, when we started, we were treating these customers as two separate entities, and then realized actually you could triangulate and use the strategic as your channel into the system. And so you'll see from some of our partnerships like Olympus, they became our route. I think we signed about 150, 200 rooms, with them just to get into that sort of market. So you can actually reduce your cost base and leverage the strategic to become your access to the market. The other point is recognizing, at what point does one become your priority market? I mean, today, the US is 60, 70% of our business. We've doubled our recurring revenue year on year now for the past 2-3 years, and have a path to do that again next year. And so at some point, you then start to think about, well, what is really the right architecture now? As we have seen this growth, and as we have created that inflection point, what is the right architecture? Because at some point, Nadine and Elliot on a plane every week, it sort of falls over when I think our health starts to sort of take a hit. But we only really until this year, and really only until a month or two ago, with Joe's help, finally hired our GM for America. We said, okay, now we're ready. It's 60, 70% of our revenue. We're doubling year on year. We've got a clear path and inflection. We now know it's working. Now we start to put the seniority, because it's a big cost. The one fortunate thing I think we had early on as well is that a lot of our investors were stateside. And I think that very honest discussion that you described, you can actually have with that investors. It was really hard in the early days to try to explain why I needed to pay a mid-range sort of sales customer success lead more than I was earning to our Remco that was largely kind of European, Middle Eastern investors who said, well, I don't understand, why would you pay that much? Like, that's kind of market in America. And so I think understanding the cost base, how long you go, can you be smart about how you access the market in less costly ways through partnerships is key. And also brings credibility. I mean, there's no doubt, not that Inovus didn't have a great brand here, and as you were traversing the Atlantic, but when you have AGL saying we're backing this product and it's going to all of our residency programs, or Sages or others saying it's Proximie and we're working with Proximie, I think that says a lot. And we still chase those till today. So for example, I can probably announce it now because there'll be some press on it next week, but we can keep it a bit Chatham House. But like, Proximie is selected as the AirCAD North America platform. And so that's going to be a huge partnership for us that is going to leverage every person who walks through AirCAD is going to see Proximie. Every surgeon, every strategic, every big customer. That's great for us. That's a partnership that's worth sort of investing in, because you know that those things will unlock. And I'm sure you've done the same with AGL. So I guess if I summarize my takeaways, like, really think about not 50 partnerships, because that sort of spray and pray approach doesn't work either. You do not have the bandwidth. We made that mistake early on. And I know Brennan in the audience will nod, fearlessly, but we tried to get every logo we could get, and we went and tried to partner with everyone. You cannot do that. Like, just pick 3 to 4 and go really deep. Mm-hmm. And don't think of partners as just med device or resellers. Hospitals and health systems in the US are partners. They have a venture arm. They want to co-develop with you. Half of the companies in our portfolio at Meridian Health Ventures actually have partnered with Cedar-Sinai. and you go in early, you incubate there, you test your product, you test your business model. You have Orlando Health Ventures, you've got Mayo Ventures, you've got, I mean, there's so many of these groups that want to co-develop and get warrants and have some structure with you that is there. And I would take advantage of that wholeheartedly. I think Northwell's another one, Mount Sinai. So just think about and there's only a few that did strategics. If you really just sell to health systems, go find those one or two really innovative health systems and say, let's partner with you. We can create some more structure. We'll give you some equity, some sweat equity, and let's really work with you to build out our product for the US market. And you'll become our reference and flagship site, because you absolutely need the reference site in the US. You can't just walk in with a nice pitch deck. Everyone's got a nice pitch deck or a nice video.
And with that, Mayo's in the back corner there. So be sure to say after this, Mayo does a great job. Down to not being distracted. And we only have a couple of minutes left. And I did want to get to Q&A, but I think this may be as valuable as any. Both of you are tenured now and have enough power in the market. How badly can a strategic pull you into the deep end of the pool and leave you there drowned without intentionally doing it? I don't know. I'm asking for a friend.
Shall I go first? We're very like the main strategic partner for us in the US. We really enjoy working with them, but it requires a lot of active management. And I think, I didn't touch on this, but I grossly underestimated the cadence of communication that was required to make sure that we were managing them well and they were managing us well. I'm someone that goes, okay, there's the North Star. We all know what we're working towards. It's written down in contracts. Everyone go and just get your heads down and do it. That assumption was a terrible assumption, that would work. And so first things first, practical piece of advice is when you do that, when you do have those partnerships, over communicate and put a huge amount of energy into the cadence, because what you don't want to do is lose the partnership and spend the next 4 years trying to get the next one. It's much more profitable to keep the ones you got. And to your point, Joe, can they pull you into the deep end? Yes. But really what you want is you want them to do that, because to Nadine's point earlier, they're going to come in and they're going to hold you to a level of excellence that even to surgical-based physicians will not hold themselves or their companies to. And that is transformational for your business. But you've got to be able to tread water for long enough and then swim against the riptide. And that takes over-communication, loads of energy. Yeah.
Oh, just add one point to that, just in the interest of time. I agree with everything Elliot said. I think one, probably not mistake, but it's sort of a learning I think we made along the way. Look, it's very easy in the early days. You know, you really want that logo, you want that partner, you're desperate to sort of please them. And so every time they say jump, you just say how high. And I remember, someone said, not every customer is a good customer. And so I think being very, very clear on the expectations on both sides. Yes, naturally, you're the weaker one, technically, from a sort of like, they're the big gorilla, you're the tiny startup company, and you're desperate to sort of please them. But I think standing your ground and being extremely clear on expectations, within that, I completely agree. Regular cadence of communication is key. Don't let them kind of swallow you up. And it's really hard to do because you're desperate to please them, and you can see the dollar signs if it goes well. But the best thing you can do early on is just be very, very clear on scope. And if it's not written down, make sure it's written down. Make sure you're revisiting it regularly with your MBRs and QBRs so that everyone knows what the expectation is. Because then otherwise you'll just get blamed for anything that doesn't work, whether it's within your control or not within your control.
We've got 2 minutes left. Any questions from the floor at all while I've got these two phenomenal resources up front here? Yes.
Given what you know now, would you just broadcast your data straight from OS?
Too hard nose. No.
Absolutely not.
We were able to go to the US and look, like that arc, we've got a lot left to do in the US, but that arc's pretty remarkable. And what I didn't share with you is we did that with less than 3 million sterling raised to go and basically take over the US gynecology training environment. The only reason we were able to do that is because we had such a stable business in the NHS and such a stable business fueling things, so that we had that optionality for if stuff doesn't go wrong, we don't have to raise loads of capital because we're not going to run out of runway.
And a lot of the build and testing that you want to do early on, you can do it at a much lower cost base here, like much, much lower. Not that the market is any less important, but just you just can afford to do that. And so by the time you're going to the US, you're not going trying to figure out what is the product. You've got a product. It's now just how do I tweak and iterate it for this market? And so you can accelerate then far quicker. I mean, we're the market leader in what we do, and we've done that from here. And we've conquered the US market through that. And I think we wouldn't be able to do that if we just started from scratch there at the pace at which we did it.
I think we mentioned as well the names, the badges that we're putting on the businesses in the US. A lot of people say, well, who's using this? It's really powerful if you turn around and say Imperial, Cambridge, Oxford. Like those are big world-renowned names. And if you lock those in, that gives you that credibility without having to then go and find your first pilot sites in the US. It's credibility by transfer.
And last point is, if you want to really partner with these strategics and be their global partner, because what you tend to see is companies that are born or just focused on the US really just think about the US market. Companies like us who are born out of Europe always think global and have built for global from day one, because you always know the UK market will never be big enough. So from day one, we were always selected above other competitors with the big strategics because we could give them a global footprint from day one. We could support data hosting in Europe, data hosting in the Middle East, data hosting in Asia, when a lot of the US competitors could only just do the US for them. And so it actually gives you an advantage, I think.
As a good point guard, I'm going to manage the clock well here. So I think we're out of time. And please thank you for thanking my wonderful partners on the panel.